Hello, this is Simon, and welcome to the Underhand Free Throws final prediction episode of the 2022-2023 NBA season. Today, me and Ian are going to go over our top six in the West. So these are the teams that we think are going to be in those guaranteed playoff spots at the end of the season. Just a reminder, all of our other predictions are uploaded on YouTube. We have our Eastern Conference and our Western Conference play-in and lottery teams, and links to those videos are going to be down in the description of this one. If you're enjoying our stuff, don't forget to like and subscribe. There will be lots more in the future, and let's get into our predictions. Yeah, and I think their defense will definitely recover as they become more healthy. And the Memphis Grizzlies, I do have them as my number 6 seed, by the way, so we can move on to the playoff teams. Their defense should recover. Another thing to point out is Desmond Bane, who I really thought was ready to emerge as their just consistent second best offensive player this year and really secure that spot. He looked like he was trending that direction at the end of last year. I mean, he's been ice cold to start the year. Like he can't hit
Yeah,
a shot. So
I
I
don't
do
worry about
think
that though. He's a really good
that
shooter. He'll be
trend
fine.
is not going to continue.
Yeah,
He's not going to shoot 25% from the floor the rest of the season. So their
totally.
offense should definitely perk up as Desmond Bane kind of falls into form.
Yeah. Moving into the guaranteed playoff spots. I had the Mavericks at 6. We have
Okay.
discussed them at length. Who do you got at 6?
Grizzlies.
All right, so we're gonna go
Yeah.
right
So
up to 5, top 5 teams.
okay. Yeah. So for my top five team, I have a team a lot of people were pretty high on this year, and we're picking to finish first in the West. I'm not a believer in their the minutes their top two stars going to play this year. I'm not a believer in their overall health of the team, and that is the Los Angeles Clippers.
Whoa, Clippers all the way down here. And I mean that prediction is looks a little bit better since we found out that Kawhi is now going to be coming off the bench. That's a little bit alarming. On one hand, it's like, it's kind of cool. I like to see it's hilarious to see like Russell Westbrook refuse to come off the bench, and think about back in the day, Allen Iverson come off the bench. Like Kawhi Leonard is so
Just
much better
accepts
than
it, man.
either of you have ever been, and he's like, yeah, sure, I'll come off the bench, preserve my health. But it does speak to this continuing narrative of like, I mean, Kawhi's this, he's this broken player. Um,
Yeah.
So that's really discouraging, because I think if you had the Clippers projected high, like I did, spoiler alert, you kind of imagined Kawhi Leonard having a chance of returning to form this year, and not that
Yeah.
he's going to play 82 games, but I was like, oh, Kawhi Leonard this year is going to play 60 games and average 30 minutes per game, and make an all NBA team sort of thing. And him coming off the bench makes that feel a little bit less likely. He's been averaging about 21 minutes per game so far. If that's a trend that's going to
Yeah.
continue all season, is he just going to kind of be kept on ice until the playoffs? And yeah, I do think that changes their projections for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not going to say going into the season I knew Kawhi was going to play 20 minutes a game. I had no idea. But what I will say is I think we all had a very strong indication that Kawhi and Paul George both were probably not going to play many, if at all, on back-to-backs, and that their minutes were going to be somewhat limited this year. And that has certainly been the case with Kawhi. And I get it. This team has depth for days. They have all these wings, all these players who uh, are just switchable defensively and can hit threes. I understand it's an awesome team for the playoffs when your stars are playing heavy minutes, but I'm not necessarily a believer in the regular season success of a team that prioritizes rest and prioritizes preparation for the playoffs rather than really pushing hard to make a difference in the regular season standings. And that's why I have them at fifth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, reasonable when you picture a downside of the team. The downside of the Clippers is exactly as you just described. I have their depth as like, just at least having them a higher basement than that. I think they actually can like win a lot of games random nights when like Norm Powell and Marcus Morris are like their go-to scorers sort of thing, especially if we're getting a lot of minutes out of Nick Batum and Robert Covington playing defense. But they might be a bit of a snoozer during the regular season. There might be this
Yeah.
team that kind of does like I definitely buy the image of the Clippers you're selling, and might have to be a little bit embarrassed about where I have put them later on in this episode, much later on in this episode.
We'll get to that.
All right,
Who did you have for your fifth team?
I've got the NBA champs
The
all the
Warriors.
all the way down here at fifth. Yeah, I was low on the
Wow.
Warriors last year, and they won the championship. And for some reason, I'm just not learning my lesson. I just think like they're going to have injury issues of their own. I feel like it's like I have to defend having the Warriors all the way down at five, and it's like no, all these teams are probably going to finish close together, and being fifth is good enough. I think similar to some things you said about the Clippers, I think this is like an older veteran team that would be foolish to chase big regular season success when they know how adaptable they are in the playoffs. Their best player is in his age 34 season. Draymond and Clay aren't getting any younger. I think there's going to be sort of like this awkward thing going back and forth where Steve Kerr's essentially like wants to play the young guys and then realizes the young guys can't like adopt a whole bunch of minutes. And I think teams like that like to use the regular season to figure stuff out. And I think that's what the Warriors will do. And I think they'll still win a lot of games. They'll probably still be a 50 plus win team. But I just think there's a couple other teams that are more likely to try their butts off to win a whole bunch of regular season games.
Yeah, I guess there's a world in which I could see the Warriors being more middle of the pack when it comes to the Western Conference playoff standings, but I just think the vibes are really good in Golden State once we get past the Draymond Jordan Poole thing. But everyone else on the team at least seems to be getting along great
You're
and
giving
loves
them
playing with each
vibe
other.
credit.
And
You're giving the Golden State Warriors good vibes credit. I don't know about that one.
their system just works so well, and
Yeah.
both defensively and offensively. So
Yeah.
it just a lot of these guys just are plug and play. Like Moses Moody, Jonathan Kuminga he's just looked really promising early on in this season. Like they just plug these guys in, and Steph makes the offense go, Draymond makes the defense go, and as long as the guys surrounding them are at least of adequate talent, the team finds success. So yeah, that is not who I had in the lower half, but we can keep going here with my number four team, first team, I guess, with home court advantage in the Western Conference. I have the Denver Nuggets. So I know a lot of people are really high in the Nuggets. There's some projections that they will win the conference or come out of the West. I try to temper that a little bit just because I'm not sure how well Jamal Murray will integrate back into the team. I mean, it's been a Jokic show for the past year. And then outside of Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. and Jokic, provided all those guys stay healthy, the team doesn't have, the greatest supporting cast in the world. It's okay. They have some decent players. You like Bones Highland coming off the bench, providing some offense. The trade for KCP, I thought, was just really sharp by the Nuggets to just give the team one more solid rotational piece who can be a 3 and D player. But, it's hard to trust Aaron Gordon's offense, and the team is a little thin outside of the guys that I've mentioned already.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think you need to trust Aaron Gordon's offense too much when he's like the seventh best offensive player on that Denver team. I think they're going to I think that offense fits together so well. I think that Michael Porter Jr. is just a freaky outlier in terms of what he can do in his specific role. And I'm
Yeah.
really into the Nuggets. Like on one hand, you've got the return of Murray and Michael Porter Jr. to monitor, and then the fun subplot is just like the chemistry of the two new guys, KCP and Bruce Brown with Jokic. So I'm tuning into those games to watch which guy gets more backdoor cuts. And I think they're going to be one of the top five offenses in the NBA. And I think they've got potential to be like solid defensively. So also just like they've got so far, knock on wood, fingers crossed, they've got the most durable, single, reliable star in the
Yeah, that's true.
NBA. And as long as Nikola Jokic is on the floor, they're going to be ridiculously good no matter what. So I think him playing 75 plus games again means the Nuggets are going to be a top 3 seed.
Can I have one minor coaching quip with the Nuggets
Hmm.
or gripe, I guess? Why is DeAndre Jordan playing more minutes than Zeke Naji? That's one thing I'm
Yeah,
not really able
that
to
sucks.
understand.
It
We keep
sucks.
hearing all these rumors and reports of how amazing Zeke Naji is. He balls out in summer league. He's apparently like this incredible shooter and defender in practice, but he doesn't play. Like we need to see it at some point. We know what we're getting with DeAndre Jordan, and it's not a lot. So I would just prefer to see the upside of this young guy instead.
Yeah, I don't think Mike Malone just doesn't seem to trust him in any way, shape, and form as like a center. Um,
Mhm.
and which makes sense. Like his defensive strengths are guarding the perimeter. Like
Yeah,
he's got quick feet and fast hands, but he's not really a backline defender. It does feel like an annoying conservative move by Mike Malone. And if your annoying conservative move is DeAndre Jordan, like I just like I don't know, take the risk. Like
yeah,
I would get it if that like oh if Clinton Capella was the backup center or something like that, or just like even just like DeAndre Jordan, like 4 years ago, like not I'm not even talking about prime DeAndre Jordan, just only slightly washed up DeAndre Jordan. I would get it, but it feels like putting him in there as a placeholder is yeah it's a little annoying. I'll agree with you there.
yeah. I understand Zeke Naji probably not the best rim protector in the world, but like newsflash, DeAndre Jordan is not a good rim protector. We've
Yeah,
seen him in
yeah.
the playoffs getting minutes the last couple of years. Dude gets barbecued.
Oh
It's
yeah.
just not a sustainable long term option. So you might as well play the young guy because there's the chance that he is better than DeAndre Jordan, and there's probably not much of a chance for him to be much worse either.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll agree there. I'm very surprised to see. Well, I'm semi surprised to see DeAndre Jordan. For poor DeAndre Jordan, he keeps getting these jobs and everyone hates it.
I mean, he's a
I want to
nice
say
guy by all accounts. Everyone seems to like him. It's just we don't need to see him
going
play
all the way
more
back to Brooklyn. It's just
meaningful
like
basketball games.
DeAndre Jordan
Yeah,
gets a job, we all groan. And somehow so like someone needs to do the breakdown on why DeAndre Jordan is still in the league, because we all know why he shouldn't be, but someone needs to explain to us all like the math, the physics, the reason DeAndre Jordan keeps getting jobs and playing legitimate minutes for team
yeah.
after team.
Yeah, you can make a relational argument for it. Like he's a veteran player. Coaches like that. Players seem to like him. He's a great teammate. But what is the basketball reason for why he's getting signed and playing? That
Yeah,
one is
yeah,
a little bit
wouldn't
harder
mind him
to explain.
on the end of a bench. Sure. All right. We'll go. It's my number 5 team. That's where we're at, right? We're at number 5
Number four.
or number 4. Oh well. Oh yeah. Sorry. No, number 4. I've got the Phoenix Suns.
Okay, yeah, you are projecting a little bit of a drop off. Well, maybe a lot of a drop off. 68 wins is a little bit hard to replicate, but anyway, the Phoenix Suns dropping off a bit from last season.
Yeah, I think I still project them to be very good. Even be a top 10 team on both sides of the floor, which puts them firmly in contender territory. But I feel like there was like aspects of their defense that got exposed last year in a major way in the playoffs, and that kind of stuff carries the stuff that messes you up in the playoffs is the stuff that goes into people's scouting reports at the beginning of the year. And rather
Mhm.
than shore up their defensive um, vulnerabilities, they're trying to go more offensive again, essentially by just promoting Cam Johnson, which I think is a great move. I'm happy to finally see
Yeah,
it. But when Cam Johnson goes from your bench player to your starter and Jay Crowder goes from starter to non-player, that's still a little bit of a talent drain overall there. So I don't see how like the Suns offense is maybe going to get even better unless we see some drop off from Chris Paul or some extended injury time from Chris Paul. But Again, I think the Suns are a team that should spend the regular season figuring themselves out and figuring out how to cover up some of their holes on offense and defense. They got a little bit exposed in the playoffs as they just like did not look like a 64 win team when it came to playoff time. They barely survived the New Orleans Pelicans without Zion, and then got humiliated by the Dallas Mavericks in that crucial game 7. And yeah, I just think the Suns should spend the season on the drawing board, keeping Chris Paul as healthy as possible for the playoffs, and shouldn't have too much interest in chasing that number 1 seed or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Paul's performance has kind of been the crux of the issue with the Suns early in the season because he's been struggling, man. Offensively, at least, the Suns' defense has held up well. They've been pretty good defensively, top 10 so far early in the year. But Chris Paul, and it's not probably too surprising for like an older player who's probably going to take some time to really get into the swing of things. You know, those players tend to limit their off-season play and their preseason play a little bit to preserve the health and everything going into the year. But he's struggled offensively going into the year. But everything else about the Suns, I think, has looked pretty good. And I do understand the embarrassment of the loss and the psychological effect that can have on a team. But it got really overblown this offseason with a lot of people who cover the NBA just projecting the Suns to like fall off a cliff or something. Like this is still
Yeah. Oh yeah,
still
I
a team
agree.
that has Devin Booker and DeAndre Ayton and should at least be very good defensively, if not, to the same elite levels they were last year.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
the
I have
the
them at the
floor is
4
high.
seed. Like it's funny
Yeah.
we're going these like at this point it's just the teams that we didn't put in the 1 seed. Like all these teams are going to be really good. So I don't need to convince anyone that the Suns are why the Suns are going to be worse this year. They're going to be really good. I honestly feel that there's this dynamic that maybe we'll see play out this year, and maybe we won't because, like you said, the Clippers might just be this conservative injured team all year. But like I felt last year that the Clippers and the Nuggets are like the 2 best teams in the West, and they took a sabbatical last year, and now those teams are
Yeah.
back. And another team that we haven't mentioned yet re-upped in a major way, made a major talent acquisition, and having the Suns, Grizzlies, and Warriors who dominated the West last year, they might just kind of slide in right under those, or just have to compete with those teams for those spots. So there's no slight with the Suns being 4th. I anticipate them to be are as maybe as good as they were last year, maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit drop off for all the factors we've discussed.
Yeah. And speaking of that third team that I noticed you did not mention the name of, but has not come up in either of our lists, do you want to go ahead and mention your third team in the West? Because I'm wondering if they're going to be in that slot there.
The number 3 seed, the Minnesota Timberwolves.
Okay. Yeah. That's exactly who I have too in the number 3 seed.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like you don't want to get too excited with a whole new product and put them too much higher than that. But I just think this team is built to pile up some serious wins in the regular season. And I'm not saying that with that. Like I feel when people have been saying that a lot, and I feel that's a very grain of salt backhanded compliment where it's just like, well, of course they're going to fall apart in the playoffs. I'm not even saying that. I just see like the tools here very quickly to threaten to be top 5 on both ends, and that's going to lead to a lot of wins. And they just have so many like basement raisers on their team in terms of Carl Anthony Towns' offense. Just honestly, he's one of those players that even when he's not playing well, like just by virtue of being on the floor and being that good at shooting at that size is like just makes a major impact on its own.
Yeah.
And Rudy Gobert has famously made some questionable defensive Utah Jazz rosters top 10 on that end as well. I also think that Minnesota's defensive roster around Gobert is way better than anything we've seen in Utah in a long time. So I just think they have got huge potential to be a great offensive team and a great defensive team. And that gets them into the top 3 for me.
Yeah, I'm right on board. And I I didn't put the Minnesota Timberwolves in my top three in my first draft of my prediction. I think I had them at 5 or 6. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized like all the arguments against why the Timberwolves will fail, I think apply a lot more in the playoffs than they do in the regular season. And the one thing I could see potentially is lack of depth. That's probably like the one thing that I'm willing to entertain, because we do have some guys who I won't say are like poor players or anything, but are maybe a little bit inexperienced in these larger roles. And Jalen Noel and Jordan McLaughlin playing like real minutes for the Timberwolves. Naz Reid has been playing a decent amount as well. But this is not a team when they have, all their starters healthy and fully available that shouldn't have one of the best starting lineups and one of the best overall units in the NBA, both on offense and on defense. And I think one thing that's telling is they've been kind of middle in the pack in offense early on to start the year, but Karl Towns was hospitalized with some kind of like crazy
Yeah.
virus to start the year and couldn't even walk until
Yeah.
like a few days before the season started. And he's been horrible to start the year, and yet the Wolves are still top 12 in offense. And like
I
that's
mean,
only going to get better as Towns continues to like, regain better health and come back to his normal form.
yeah, it shows. Like he looks so skinny out there. Like I barely recognize him. He's like, I mean, do you remember him at Kentucky and when he came into the NBA and he was just kind of this like monster rebounder, like post up bully
Yeah.
sort of thing? Like compare that to the guy we're seeing right now, just because he's out there looking like this like skinny old man.
Mhm.
And at no point did he ever say that he wanted to drop weight for the playoff for this season or whatever. Like, obviously he was
No.
playing power forward this year, so you'd be like, oh, maybe he purposely wanted to get a little bit more um, sleek. But he said quite the opposite. He said he struggles more in the NBA when he doesn't have some weight on him to fight through contact. And I think that's really evident when you watch him play because he's someone who likes to attack the basket off the dribble, and he struggles against stronger players. So he's a player that needs weight, and I don't think getting skinnier for him is a good thing. So I think this was an unfortunate setback for Towns, and what could have, like, different players start the season hot every year, and we get excited and can't always read too much into that, but like he basically got disqualified from being one of those players, but just like, yeah, getting horribly ill in training camp, only having a couple preseason games out of the belt, and you can see that he looks a little shaky out there.
I want to mention one thing with the Wolves that I think really stood out to me over the offseason, going into the season, making these predictions, and also early on in the season. And that is, I heard it said that as almost a criticism that Towns and Gobert on the floor at the same time are going to be an awkward fit because when screens are switched, teams are just going to put a smaller guy on Gobert. And as we've seen in Gobert in the past, you can dump the ball off to him in the post. And if he doesn't have to dribble, he's extremely effective, shoots an insane percentage, just, dunks or lays in the ball. If he does have to dribble, that's when he gets into trouble. But I think the size issues that both Towns and Gobert both being able to at least finish in the paint, Towns maybe more so with a bit more of a versatile skill set, because is like you are going to have small guys in Gobert, and Gobert's been really good at just like pushing those guys down and stealing them near the rim. And if you can
And
get him the ball, which the Utah Jazz famously struggled to do, and we'll see how well the Timberwolves adapt to this, but like if you can get him the ball, like he finishes that. Like he's been averaging I think only 14 points a game, so not like 16 points a game. It's not a crazy amount, but has been a very efficient scorer so far in the year, and has really been able to punish teams when they put like small guys on him. So I don't think that's something that teams can just easily do and mitigate Gobert offensively.
yeah, and we talked about this in our bounce around the NBA earlier in this episode. But I think one thing that Minnesota has shown they're going to do is they're going to throw the ball to Gobert very aggressively. And so if you want to put a small guy on him, it's exactly like you said. He's going to seal them. And Towns, Edwards, and Russell are going to be very aggressive hunting to get Gobert that matchup. So,
Yeah. I mean, it only worked to do that on the Jazz because the Jazz wouldn't pass him the ball. If you get
Yeah.
him the ball when he's close enough to the rim, like it's 2 points. Like it just is. So,
Rudy Gobert criticism the past couple of years has become like, I'm sorry for all of you out there, but like this is how I differentiate like dumb and smart fans. When I hear people talk about Rudy Gobert, this is how I assess fan and media basketball IQ, because like people have had the worst takes about Gobert and they just love to like blame him for things that were completely about roster construction.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, I just think this team has crazy regular season upside, and it sounds like we both feel that way. But let's keep going for my
So
number
number
two team
two,
in the West this year. It's between the Warriors and the Suns, right? That's all we have left. And out of those teams, I'm gonna have to go with the Suns as the second best team in the West this season.
yeah, I don't have the. I've already spent my Suns and my Warriors, so I've got the Nuggets up here.
Okay,
Yeah,
interesting. So yeah, I mean, we talked about both teams extensively already. I'm a believer in cohesion, um, and for some reason, I buy into the Suns when it comes to that,
yeah,
not the Mavericks. I'm not trying to
yeah.
say I
We're
can do it perfectly, but I saw the Cam Johnson upgrade into the starting lineup as hugely beneficial for the Suns. Should be still a very solid, high floor offensive and defensive team this season, and I think they're built for regular season success. Like it's the same thing as with Gobert. Like forget the playoff stuff for now. Like we're just talking about the regular season. The Suns should be a machine this year.
Yeah, they were a machine last year, and they are not much of a different team than they were. Um, and yeah, up at number one, let's give some final notes on the Warriors and my number one team, the Clippers. I kind of like that we have these two opposite teams at number one because like
Yeah, we
they
had them
very
both at 5 as well.
yeah yeah and they very much like kind of represent two different kind of schools of thought. Like I mean, just like the Warriors won the championship. The Warriors are a dynasty.
Yeah,
We just saw the Warriors get it done, and the Clippers have been this like theoretical injury mess for a long time that basically just took a sabbatical, and they're both also like teams built around kind of older stars that could possibly break down. My main concern with the Warriors that I didn't mention before is that like little sneaky their offense is obviously great in the playoffs, but a little like sneaky weird trend about them is like their offense has been very underwhelming in the regular season these past couple of years. Like last year they finished 17th on offense. I don't really get that. Like when you think like, what do you mean? You got Steph Curry, you got Jordan Poole coming off the bench, you've got like Clay Thompson, you have so many offensive weapons, but it's like they're a team that does not, for whatever reason, really go off on the offensive rating in the regular season. And this is something that, during their sort of sabbatical when they were injured, their defense typically stayed really strong. But I mean, like that year when they won 15 games, their offense was last in the league. And when they came back, it only rose up to 20th, even though their defense stayed at 5th. Like this is for all the talk about the wonder of Steph and his offense, this has been a team that has had a much more consistent defense over this entire time. So it's just one of those things that kind of gives me pause. And if it's going to be a really competitive top of the West this year, I think the downside for Golden State is that I literally have them finishing as a top 3 defense and the 19th ranked offense this year, which is not far from where last year they were 17th and second. So you can't say that that's an outrageous projection.
I won't say outrageous. I wouldn't go that far, but I do see a improved offensive team this season over what they had last season.
I mean, just because their
And
young guys are older.
well, I think a big part of it is James Wiseman is good. He's a very large body that can put pressure on the rim. And I understand he doesn't play a whole lot, but I just think that adds a completely different dynamic than what they had last year. With Draymond picking up a lot of minutes at the backup 5, or Nemanja Bjelica or guys like that. Just kind of a kind of a weird cohort of players playing in the backup center. Like they have a legit physically dominant center that can just overpower certain matchups and just be like a huge mismatch against certain
Yeah.
teams now.
On the flip side of that, I do think that last year those guys that were playing at center, Otto Porter and Nemanja Bielica, Belly, those guys could really pass the ball and they could really shoot the ball. And
Mm-hmm.
they would come in and they'd probably those guys would often play in crunch time, like especially early in the season. Bielitsa was kind of one of their crunch time closers just because he was really good at setting screens, passing, and hitting open shots. I think Wiseman's a more complicated piece to add in, and like the Warriors have never had a rim diver since Festus Ezeli. That's the last time that they had a
It's kind of a
um
stretch calling him a
I
effective
mean
rim
that,
diver, but yeah,
but like he was coming off the bench behind Andrew Bogut, and that was what his role was, right? It was like just
yeah,
kind of rim dive and crash the offensive glass, and that's something that has been largely. It just I'm not saying that Wiseman can't boost their offense in that way because I mean like you say, it's an element they haven't had before and increase the diversity of their attack. But yeah, I'll need to. I want to see how that fits in. I also think like if they're going to be playing, I think it's important that they play Kuminga and Moody and Wiseman um, a bunch more minutes. And I think I watched their opening game, and they clearly they wanted to build a bench lineup that I think it was Wiggins, Poole, Kuminga, Moody, and Wiseman. And it was like you could see Kerr being like, I want to throw them in the water and give them this lineup where like here's the young guys, here's the future of the Warriors sort of thing. And it was like
mm-hmm.
it wasn't working out, and they kind of panic pulled the lineup off after a couple of minutes. I'm not saying that will happen every night. I think that lineup could be really functional, but me saying the Warriors are going to drop from 17th to 19th is not me saying the Warriors are going to have some offensive collapse. They could even get better. I just think there's a lot of wicked offenses in the NBA this year that are coming
Yeah,
up through the pipe. I just think like you got the Hawks, Clippers, Nuggets, Pelicans, Suns, Timberwolves. The Sixers have James Harden and Joel Embiid and tons of shooting. You got the Nets with a healthy roster. You got the Bucks. Like the Celtics were solid offense last year. You got the Cavs, you got the Kings, you got the Grizzlies, you got Dame's back on the Trailblazers. Like there's the Heat and the Raptors and the Mavericks. Like that's so many teams that are expected to be good offensively. And seeing
yeah,
them finish 17th last year in a less crowded NBA, I'm just like, yeah, I can see the Warriors really like not posting impressive offensive numbers throughout the regular season and then somehow morphing into an unstoppable, unguardable, like no adjustments work against them beast in the playoffs again. That's
yeah,
the only reason I see. That's the only potential downside I see for them. And again, I think it's good when teams like this just tinker to make themselves more formidable in the playoffs. They've got nothing left to prove here. That being said, yeah, if they finished with the 1 seed, I'm not surprised either. And I think all the downsides that you said earlier about the Clippers are more likely, and that they are more likely than the Warriors to go into total autopilot mode. But I just think the Clippers have more to actually figure out with this roster, and it's a little bit much Clippers for you to think that you can just chill out and wait for the playoffs, considering you haven't gone to the Western Conference Finals, except for that year when Kawhi was hurt, and that was kind of a weird year, anyways.
yeah. I mean, the only final thing I'll say with the Warriors, and they've been kind of middle of the pack both offensively and defensively so far in this young season. So they're not lighting the world on fire, but Wiggins has firmly stepped into the role of the second best player on this team, and he's at least early on looked extremely comfortable doing so. So if that keeps up, we may see a deserved all-star selection for Andrew Wiggins this year.
I'm yeah, his first deserved one. Yeah, as a Canadian and a Timberwolves fan, I like I'm very traumatized when it comes to Andrew Wiggins. Like I definitely enjoy his success, but I'm just gonna say it's complicated for me. I've been through a lot with this boy, so I'm not
Yeah.
comfortable making any Wiggins related projections. I just will enjoy it when it goes well, and I'll keep my mouth shut the whole time.
Yeah. And I think for the Clippers, Kawhi's not playing a whole lot, and he's looked okay when he's played. It's definitely not the same Kawhi. It definitely seems like there's some rust to shake off. Although he did kind of have like the game clinching shot against the Lakers when they played the other night. But for the most part, like he looks good, but it's not the same Kawhi that we're used to. But some things that have been promising are John Wall is looking like he's back. Yeah, definitely a better version of John Wall than we last saw when he was like leading a Houston Rockets tank effort and was just kind of shooting inefficiently and
Yeah,
not giving great effort on defense. This looks like a reinvigorated John Wall, and that's great to see.
I still see a little bit of like John Wall will take a 20-foot pull up, and I'm like, that is absolutely the last thing. That's the worst shot this offense could generate.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, that's
like
kind of always what he's done.
I know
That's kind of a
it
John Wall
just
thing.
it just feels worse when he's doing it and he's not like paired with Marcin Gortat and Markieff Morris, but instead it's like like Luke Kennard and Paul George and like just a whole bunch of dudes who can really shoot the ball, and he's taking an
Yeah.
early long two in the shot clock. It's just like John Wall, you got one really specific job to do on this roster, and that is like penetrate in the paint, cause the defense to move a little bit closer to you, and then pass the ball. Or score if they don't collapse on you. But I'm nitpicking here. He's having a good start to the season. He's putting up like 16 points per game on like a efficient scoring in the paint, and that's awesome for the Clippers. I think the him really committing to that more strict point guard role and not having that kind of star impulse shot improvisation is something that I still feel he has a little bit in
Yeah.
him. Kawhi looks, what you said earlier about Kawhi, I totally agree, but like, man, he looks slow. He looks like, do you remember like Spurs Kawhi Leonard that was just like pulling the ball out of people's dead bodies after he murdered them with his like lightning quick like feet and hands? It's just like
Yeah, but we haven't really seen that version of Kawhi on the Clippers like ever.
but it's like every year I feel like it gets a little bit worse, and I think that's just like that's just speaking to his knee. It's really funny to go back and remember all the people who were like doubting his injury. Like, you
Yeah.
remember when he got injured in the Spurs and that whole fiasco, and people were being like, he's not even hurt, he's just faking it. He's just be like, I never under like, why would anyone ever do that? Like what
Yeah.
advantage could you have as an NBA player just be like, yeah, I'm just gonna not play NBA games for no reason? But I mean, we're seeing it now. Like that knee uh is degrading, and unless that trend changes this season, like I'm not going to count on Kawhi ever being like a all NBA player again. I think of him more as like, okay, you're like old man Ginobili on the Spurs. You're like that guy who can morph into one of the best players in the NBA strategically for a few games in the playoffs. But if this is where you're at right now, I think that's very concerning. And which has me already being like, oh man, I picked the Clippers to finish first. Like that's like Kawhi Leonard averaging 12 points per game and 21 minutes per game, and already having sat out a game.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh man. Anyways, I'm just like, they'll be great if they can get him healthy to the playoffs, and that matters. But I already don't feel great about overrating this team's regular season success.